Life is a journey, and everyone's path is unique. On Dimlit Path, we uncover the twists, turns, and defining moments that shape who we are today. I'm Matt Myers, and in each episode, I'll be sitting down with incredible people to hear their stories, how they got here, the challenges they faced, and what's next on their journey. Welcome to the first iteration of Dimlit Path. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to explain your journey, explain other journeys, and we'll see where it goes.
I'm excited for you. This is cool. I'm honored to be the first person.
First guest, James Cech. I have you as an actor, a musician, an interpreter, and I believe there's some other things in there, but I'm going to hold those for later. Can you tell me about your early years and what kind of got you started in those years into where you're at today?
Yeah. You know what actually I think gets credit for kicking all of this off is my absolute passionate love of watching Barry Sanders play football. Let me explain. So I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and in Reno, there is no professional team. There was no professional team at the time. Las Vegas now has them. But there was no professional team in Nevada. And so we were big San Francisco 49ers fans or whatever it was. Like really it was your family heritage that kind of informed what sport team you follow.
Yeah.
So my dad being from Michigan and being from Flint, we were Detroit everything. And Barry Sanders was in his prime when I was like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And I just loved watching him play. And the fact that Barry Sanders was small was exciting because I was like, I'm kind of a smaller dude and I'm fast. So I played football. Played pop order football, and then I moved to Michigan. I played middle school football. And it was that moment when I came in and played 7th grade and 8th grade football, and I was like, oh, kids are starting to get really big. And I am not growing. That I kind of realized like maybe football's not gonna be the way that I go. Still loved it, but in my mind that's when I started to like consider other things, and that's when I got involved really heavily in drama. We had this amazing English teacher, drama teacher in middle school named John English, excellent name for a teacher, and he recognized and invested a lot in me. I was brand new to the school. Middle school is a tough age to change and try to make new friends. And he recognized that. And so I spent a lot of time kind of outside of any social group. And then what he did was he got me involved in this speech competition from the Optimist Club. And I don't know, I know the Optimist Club is still running, but like, I don't know how many people are aware of the Optimist Club. And they did a speech competition. And the speech competition was middle school and high school all combined. And I ended up winning my city, my district, and then the state competition as a 7th grader. And I beat out high school students to end up getting this, I think it was like a scholarship money that I was able to use later on. And one of my big jokes that landed so well was, my dream is to play football. And then I would move around the podium. I'm like, but look at me, and like that kind of, disarmed the audience. Like that was one of the things in that performance, that relating to people, feeling comfortable in a public speaking environment, utilizing my words and my storytelling, all of that started really in earnest at that moment. Before that, I loved performing. My dad was a performer. Music was a part of my life in certain ways, but it didn't click until that moment. And that's when I kind of got the bug. And that's really informed the trajectory of my career and the opportunities that I pursued.
So what was, obviously after middle school, like an initial role or initial job that you had that started it all?
Yeah. The performer aspect, I joined a group called the Young Americans, which my dad was a former member of it, and I had seen them perform at a dinner theater up in Boyne Highlands, Michigan, all growing up. That's where I auditioned. I moved out to LA, and the founder of the group, Milton Anderson, was still alive and still heavily involved. And I remember I performed as Cat in the Hat when we did "Oh, the Things You Can Think" from the musical
Okay.
Seussical. And he's known me again since I was like 5 years old. And so there was definitely, in his eyes, you could see this resistance to, I know you, I like you, and so I'm going to give you like, I'm going to make things easy for you. He definitely worked hard to be like, you got to prove your worth. And I performed. He came and saw us on tour, and after the show, he was giving notes to the cast. He said, "Where's the guy who played the Cat in the Hat?" He didn't even recognize that it was me. So I raised my hand, and he looked at me. And he goes, "Oh," and just like that response to like performing it so well, somebody who knew you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even recognize me doing it. Somebody who has been doing this for 60,
He had
70
no idea it was
years,
you.
right? That reaction that you
Yeah.
could have someone enjoy a performance so much, get lost in the performance, and even if you knew the person, like there was this disbelief, and not
Mm-hmm.
even disbelief, but like you're creating that environment, that imaginary world that they really invested in. That was super fun, and I
Interesting.
think that was I when I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this to some degree.
Yeah. So, one of the other things, looking a little bit into your background, and I know you mentioned this before, but like you were on like international tours. You weren't just like an aspiring, actor. What were you doing on those tours?
Those tours were outreach tours and performance opportunities with the young Americans, and incredibly formative for just how I approach performing, and also just how I approach seeing myself as like just a person in the world,
Mm-hmm.
getting to see so many different cultures. When I think a professional performer is in a show regularly, they're like they're put up in a hotel, and then they go to rehearsal, and then they do the show, and like those are their main spaces. What was great about this particular company is we spent a lot of time teaching kids. So we would go to schools, and then we would actually stay in the houses of the families with the
Mm.
kids. And when I was in Germany, I had taken German in high school, so I could speak some German. I mean, conversationally fluent, but having conversations over the dinner table in German was just such an enriching experience. We were in Japan. Um, the families there, I got to stay with a professional opera singer who studied and lived in Italy. While he was in Italy, his wife, who's also Japanese, became this amazing cook of Italian food. So I'm in Japan, and every night we're having like
Italian.
pasta and like just these incredibly rich Italian dinners, and they were just incredibly good. When we were in Sweden, we did Canada and a America tour as well. It just put that bug in me though to explore other cultures, to meet other people, and I got the opportunity to. After I left the group, I was hired to do Tony in West Side Story for a collaboration,
Mm.
and so I did Tony in France, and that's where I met my wife. She was playing in the pit. She was also part of the exchange, and then I don't think I think those are the only countries that I've been a performer while going and touring on.
So, given all these things you've done up until then, was there like any challenges or setbacks that you had to overcome, and how did you handle those at that time?
I'm I would say within the performing world, definitely like I missed. I didn't make a tour. I auditioned for it and I
Mm.
didn't get cast, and so I spent those months living in LA, and it's expensive to live in California. That was a couple of years into being part of that performing company. And so, the money that I had saved up for college that had all been spent. So
Yeah.
I'm working overnight at Toys R Us, during the holiday season. So all day on,
Toys R
Black
Us.
Friday, right?
Yeah.
And this was pre-cyber deals. There's no
Yeah.
cyber deals going on. This was like people line up at 4 a.m. for when the doors open. So I'm working from 10 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, stocking shelves at Toys R Us. I'm sleeping from 6 o'clock until maybe 10. I get up, I have a couple of hours to do my, errands, and then
Mhm.
I'm driving through LA to get to the rehearsal
Mm.
space, and I'm rehearsing from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night. I go home, I have dinner, and then I get to Toys R Us, right? Like that grind,
Wow.
that cycle of really only sleeping a few hours and just not being on the same schedule as the rest of the world. That was tough,
Yeah.
but it really just showed to me at that time, especially, like, I can make it work.
Mhm.
Whatever I want to do, this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in LA. So I'm living in Anaheim. I'm performing in LA. I'm rehearsing in LA. I'm working at the Toys R Us in Orange. But LA is busy. It's loud. It's congested. It takes hours to drive. 30 minutes what would take in Michigan. So but putting that time in, having no money. All the money I earned went to rent and food,
Mhm.
and my joke to my son is I lived off of one chocolate bar for a week. Like, that was it. I broke off one piece a day. That was my treat,
Wow.
but just the discipline to be able to say, this is how much I have. This is how much I need to be able to
Mhm.
spend. This is what I want to do. And this is the effort I need to put in to make it work. And I will do it.
Mhm.
And I made it through. And some days are hard, but I have a lot of good memories when I think about that
Yeah.
time, right? Like, it wasn't just like soul sucking. There were a lot of great things that I was able to do because I was working hard so that I could invest my time in doing the thing that brought me
Yeah.
joy.
You mentioned a couple, I think you mentioned one, if not two mentors when you were young. Did you have any, like, when you were out there in LA, was there like role models you were looking up to or mentors that were
Yeah,
helping you get through things? Because this sounds like a tough time that you're on your own. Like, that's a lot.
definitely. Along the way, I was I was always aware I needed to find the person in the room who knew what I wanted.
Mhm.
Either knew what I wanted to know or could do what I wanted to do. And I was always looking for that person. And when I found that person, I would just kind of, like, almost like the old Greek philosophers, right? Their students would just find them.
Mhm.
It wasn't a formal class that met on Tuesday afternoons. Wherever they were, their students would find them and sit at their feet and just, like, absorb.
Yeah.
And I did that. And so, like, like you said, yeah, in middle school, Mr. English would just invest back in me. In high school, it was Mrs. Lombardo. She would invest back in me. When I got to the Young Americans in that time, that pushing through really hard, there was more of a peer mentor named Nada. And she was just a couple years older than me. And she had been brought back. So she had done a lot of the performing. And so now she was more like a performer teacher, right? Somebody
Gotcha.
who knew
Yeah.
the group and then was leading these newer members of the cast. And she would always catch me just, like, staring at her and, like, observing all of her stuff. And she'd, like, look at me and be like, stop it, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I would watch everything that she did. And then when she noticed that really I'm trying to pick up a lot from her, she'd be like, hey, have you noticed this? And that remains my favorite method of mentoring, which is, like, to sit together with somebody, look at somebody else's performance,
Mhm.
and not critique it, but say, do you see how they're doing this? Like, just highlight all the great things that they're doing, and just pulling out, like,
Yeah.
let's start to see these, incredible skills, but also incredible choices that they're making. You need someone who can see them to point them out to you when you're younger. We also had some really good tour managers and teachers. Cynthia McGarity, again, was a huge mentor for me during that time when I was in LA and couldn't go on tour.
Mhm.
And she really helped me focus and maintain and push through when I'm not doing it for a particular project. I'm doing it to maintain my skill level, maintain where I'm at. She was instrumental in really teaching me how to push through and say the seasons of your life when you're not doing exactly what you want to do, you better be preparing for when that next opportunity comes.
Okay. Do you have some moment that you had where everything just started to click for you?
And I didn't recognize I was on the path, which really makes it dim. Really, really makes it dim. Or I was dim.
Yeah.
One of the two. So when I was in high school, I was in middle school actually. I was on a football team, and I met my friend Daniel, and Daniel's deaf. And so I learned sign language
Yeah.
just to like talk with my friend. And I saw he had an interpreter who followed him around during the school day, so I got to see what an interpreter did from, 12 years old, which is not a frequent experience for most people.
Okay.
And then in high school, a couple of older actors, because I was probably a sophomore, so a couple of seniors, found a scene from a show that used sign language because it was a deaf woman and a hearing man in this scene together. So they kind of really brought this show to life, and the director was inspired. And then remembering we had a deaf student in the school, they were like, let's do this show. So we did a show when I was in high school that was in two languages, fully in sign and fully spoken English, which was absolutely phenomenal. And I grew in my sign language capabilities through these, dramatic productions, and then for my friend. When I graduated, he went off to college on the East Coast, and I moved out to LA, and I was like, boom, that's it.
Yeah.
But sign language never left me. Like I never lost the ability to sign. I never forgot
Mm-hmm.
any of those signs. And then when I was in England, for one, those are the three countries I forgot: England, Ireland, Scotland. We did a British tour. When I was in England, one of the schools, a girl who joined the workshop was deafblind.
Mm.
And so with their interpreter, I introduced myself and we started communicating with her. And then they taught me British Sign Language because it's totally different than American Sign Language. So I learned a little bit from them. So over these 3 days, I got to interact with this, deafblind person in England, learn a totally different form of visual language, really enjoyed it. And then of course, didn't think anything of it. And then I go to Japan and I just bump into a bunch of deaf people on the street. So I'm seeing their sign language and trying to sign my best as well. And it didn't last very long, but everybody was very respectful. And then I didn't even think about it. And then I did a summer dinner theater, and a deaf woman came to see the show. And to kind of add some artistic beauty, I was doing a little bit of sign language for one of the songs, like for the ballads. And they were so excited that I signed this song in the show. And
Wow.
again, all these moments, I never even thought about them until then it was time to I left LA, I moved back to Michigan. I was completely untethered in terms of I had
Yeah.
no idea what the next step was. My stepmom happened to be teaching at Baker College at the time. Baker had an interpreter training program. So I'm
Okay.
looking through this list of college program or college
Yeah.
degrees, thinking it's the best place to go to college because I get half off because my stepmom's teaching there. I'm like, I know sign language. This will be great. I ended up driving down because the most of the program was in a different city. I ended up driving down to that city. I met Ron Dans, who would become like my number one mentor for this profession for the next 2.5 years. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with the language. I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with so much to the deaf world that I didn't know. And so you realize I couldn't have gotten to that point if
Yeah.
I didn't keep having these little path bumps,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
keeping me on track, keeping it, just always refreshing it in my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
then, when the opportunity comes, it turns out there could not have been a better fit for me.
So on that note, like you definitely you you had a path that was literally lit up in front of you, and you're like, I can't really see down at that too far.
Right. It's
So
I'm an actor. I'm gonna be in movies one day. I'm gonna be on Broadway.
yeah.
Not come to find out, nope, that path is just was always there.
So you went to school,
Yeah.
you got a degree in interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
you're also an actor, a
Well,
musician. How did that impact you? Like, where did you go from there?
I ended up
So,
seeing two interpreter performers who did the Broadway tour of Beauty and the Beast when it came through the Fisher Theater in Detroit when I was in my last year of school. And I remember seeing them and going, that, that is the perfect combination of all the places that I've been and where my new kind of, education is taking me. And when I was just about to graduate, I auditioned and I was an intern member of their company until I became certified. And so I would sit with them and I would watch them prepare for shows and I would go to their shows and I would man the cameras because they would video record for, the archive kind of a thing. And I just absorbed so much. And so when you think about that's what was happening in 2009,
yeah.
I'm this baby interpreter, just about to graduate from school with incredible performers and just getting part of their company to if you look at the way the iteration is now, I own that company. That and they weren't the first persons to found it. That company really came from a project that had happened before that with the male owner,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and then when that split happened, like I own now a company that stems from this parent company.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a small business owner. That's where that is. My the skill level, the certification that I hold is a really difficult certification to attain. I reached that level so quickly in my career because I was in a language rich environment with theater constantly translating ASL to English, English to ASL, ASL to English, right? I was doing it so much more than most interpreters did. And I needed to rewire my brain almost because it needed to be not just on the spot, like what they say, what I did. Oh, I probably made a bunch of mistakes. It had to be perfect. So I spent hours and hours perfecting signs
Wow.
for different sentences. So that really shaped that moment of connecting with theater, which is what I had been doing up to that moment, and
Mm-hmm.
interpreting, which is where I was, completely accelerated where I went from that moment.
You mentioned business owner.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things I was leaving out because uh, I did know you were a business owner. The other things that I had seen was game designer. This
Yeah.
was something I had no idea about, and I'm like, this is interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so what do you got on that?
I mean, I've always been a board game fanatic. I mean, I was playing NFL Monopoly with my best friend when I was like 10 years old every day for like a year
Mm-hmm.
almost. So I've always loved board games. And when I moved to Michigan, I got plugged in with the Shakespeare Theater in Flint. And one guy who he performed a couple of times, but really he was there because his kids were frequently the child actors in the shows. And he and I connected. So Sean McIntyre and I became fast friends through this theater. And then we ended up like just kind of going down this really fun path of like anything creative we could do together, we've done. So we did these live shows together. He put on a live show and produced it. So I helped him with that show. We did, I think, 3 or 4 submissions of short films into short film festivals that he wrote and directed and filmed, and I performed in, and we would collaborate on that stuff. So we just went real deep into like lighting and production and sound and podcasting and just everything. We went everywhere together. And then a couple of years ago, he comes to me and goes, I have an idea for a board game. Do you want to see if this board game idea has anything to it?" And I'm like, "Yes, of course I do." Right? I would say yes to him for anything, but also games are right up
Yeah.
my alley. And I was just getting into Dungeons and Dragons as a dungeon master. So like I was right in that realm of like let's see how this goes. So over the last 2 years, he and I have created 12 games together. And those games have 3 very specific principles, which is it needs to be super easy to learn. No game should take you 30 minutes to learn how it goes.
I'm still learning games that I play with my kids.
Right? It needs to take like 1 minute. And you're like, oh, Uno level easy. That's our goal.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be easy to learn. It also needs to be, for the most part, quick to play. We like games that are like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this game might take about 10, 12 minutes, but for the most part, when everybody knows what they're doing, it's going to take about 5 minutes to play this game. So we're like, yeah, for families that want to say, you might play our games for 45 minutes, but you're played 9 times in that 45 minutes. So it needed to be able to go quickly and have a lot, but then every time you play it, so the third principle was infinite replayability. The game should change every time you play. Not by the rules,
Okay.
not by adding things, but more by the odds. How the game actually plays itself out is different every time you play it.
Okay.
And so we use dice and cards. That's it. I mean, just the chance that's naturally built into those mechanics. And we have really fun games. Matter of fact, he and I, when we hang out and just like brainstorm about stuff, we always end up playing our own games for a good 20 minutes. We're just like, hey, let's play checkers today. And we'll pull it out and play. Yeah, so the company's called Super Dicey Games.
Okay.
The pun being dicey, like, is this any good? Which is pretty fun, right? So Dicey Games. And then we are in a pitch competition here in Flint.
That's what I saw.
Yeah, so I'll be making that pitch February 27th. And then we're working on getting, we want to get a polished, produced version of the game, and then we will take to Kickstarter, which is a really good place because there's such a large board game community already plugged into Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So working from that platform to then start to get pre-sales and manufacturing and get that stuff up and running.
What keeps you grounded? What keeps you motivated?
My wife. 100% my wife keeps me grounded. In terms of my motivation, that's just something intrinsic. So I'll a little bit on both. My wife keeps me grounded because I think my enthusiasm to just like, oh my gosh, let me try this, 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 let me try this. And I would do so many things volunteer and just to get my foot in the door, like I'll do whatever. That served me well. I have a ton of skill. I've learned a ton of things just by, oh my gosh, that sounds really interesting. Let me try it. Let me just get my foot in the door. And at this point, though, in my career, my wife's amazing to say, you've become an expert in some very important things. So don't lose that. Don't take time away from where you were an expert to just add a bunch of other things that you're interested in. Really remember, what you can give back and what are some new dimensions to what you're an expert in. What are some ways you could explore more, but more tangential to that. And so that's been really important to me as I've kind of matured now into the middle of my career, is to just continue to specialize. So Jessica really helps me in that regard. But when it comes to what keeps me motivated, again, it goes back to that natural enthusiasm for things. I need to be learning. If I am not learning, if I am not growing, if I am not challenging myself, if I am not saying, wow, I'm uncomfortable because I've never done something like this before. Is it going to work out well? Is there something I'm going to glean from it? And it could be, I may not continue to do this, but there's a piece of it that has made, again, what I specialize in or has made what I do well even better. If I'm not doing that, if I'm stagnant, I am beyond restless. I need to have a project even on a Saturday at home. I can't like sit still. Jessica I'll be pacing the house. She goes, you're floppy. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, find something to put your energy into. I just have so much of it. So I really try to stay motivated and to continue to learn. And then I get inspired by that. I love learning new things because I love making those connections. oh my gosh, and I've known this for so long. I just learned this. And when I put the two together, I'm like, oh, that makes this now has a new understanding for me or a new application for me
Mm-hmm.
when I've had this element to it. And I love those moments. I will never I'll never stop having those moments till I die.
So, actor, musician, dancer,
Mm-hmm.
really performer, game designer, business owner, and certified interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
What is next on your path?
I think the next phase for me really is transitioning now into being a good steward of my knowledge, experience, skill, and network
Mm-hmm.
to then give back to my professional and artistic communities and say, what opportunities can I be a driving force in creating to give more people, or not necessarily even more people the opportunity, but to continue to like breathe life back into what I've spent so long kind of taking from, in the sense of growing
Mm-hmm.
as a professional, growing as a performer, taking advantage of the opportunities that were given to me. How can I start creating opportunities now for the people who are coming up behind me, for other people who are interested, or just, again, in that community, just continuing to breathe life into it. And so I really want more like a director position and, leadership position, and just pushing into that producer side of things.
All right.
Good luck on the dim lit path, man.
Yeah.
I'm behind you all the way.
What an amazing story from James Cech on Dimlit Path. Proof that every path is unique and every journey matters. Until next time, keep moving forward and writing your own story.